All right, it's 12:30 on the dot, so we will get started. Welcome everyone to Project Echo Geriatrics. I'm so glad you joined us. This is our last Project Echo Geriatrics for this academic year, but we continue every month. We're just skipping June because it falls on Juneteenth, so federal holiday, and we will rejoin again in July. But I'm really glad all of you joined us today, and I want to proactively congratulate anyone who's graduating from residency or their various schools of all of the folks who are participating. So I will say congrats. And we have some residents who I think are graduating pretty soon who are presenting cases. So thanks for doing that. We're going to start off like we usually do with our didactic, and then we're going to get into our case discussions. We have 2 cases today, so we're going to try to stay on time here. We have a speaker who might be familiar to many of you, Dr. Jesse Katz, who was a geriatric medicine fellow several years ago now at the University of Washington and is out in Boston. He's with Cambridge Health Alliance. He is the director of their program for all-inclusive care of the elderly. And he's going to talk to us about ageism, which is a very important topic always, but particularly this month because it's Older Americans Month. So thank you, Jesse, for presenting.
Thanks, Kate. You can see my presentation okay?
It looks great.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your time. This is a topic that I am excited to talk about, excited to get people interested in. It is something that is present everywhere, ageism, and it's something that we often don't have a great awareness of. So my hope with today's talk is just to kind of put something in your minds, get you thinking a little bit, and maybe even we'll have a chance to share some stories or observations we've made in our experiences. I have no disclosures. Objectives to kind of break it down a little bit more is to just define ageism. What is it? The history of it. Understanding the impacts of ageism within the healthcare system, and identify ageist language. And I'll say that this is a presentation that I gave during my time at UW in 2022 to 2023 during my fellowship, was my grand rounds topic. So there's an expanded version on the University of Washington's YouTube page. Ageism is defined as a process of systematic stereotyping and discrimination against people because they are old. This is a definition that was coined by Robert Butler. He was a physician and the first director of the National Institute on Aging. Once this term was out there, and with this definition, conversations and research around the topic have been pursued, including the effects ageism has had on patient outcomes, as well as the physicians and other healthcare providers who treat them. And I think it's important we understand the impacts that it has as well to kind of help us motivate ourselves to make a difference and pay attention to the impacts that this has. There are 4 primary types of ageism it's broken down into, and again, these are defined by Robert Butler. I'll define each one and give a little example of each. So explicit ageism would be defined as practices carried with knowledge of bias. So you're actively aware of it, taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of older persons. An example would be like telling an older adult they shouldn't go to rehab or get a surgery because they're too old without considering individual circumstances aside from their age and the recommendations. You know, you're 85, you shouldn't have your knee replaced. We should pause and think a little bit about that. And often people are aware they're doing that. They look at someone, see they're old, and dismiss them immediately. Implicit ageism, and there can be an overlap sometimes between the two, maybe we don't realize always, are practices in which perpetrators are unaware of the bias against persons or groups based on their older age. An example I would think of would be maybe an older adult says to you that they want do on their post, and you just say yes, sure, rather than taking the time, sitting down with them, making sure it's an informed decision, they know what they're saying, they may feel differently once they truly understand. And it's really important we treat someone the same who's 75, 85, 95, who says that, as we would someone younger, and give them that opportunity to really understand the decisions they're making for their own healthcare, even if we think we know what's best for them. Institutional ageism would be missions, rules, and practices that discriminate against individuals or groups because of their old age. I think these are often based in the lack of representation in research, maximum age limits on jobs, or culture of not hiring older adults in various jobs. That would be one example, just based on their age, assuming they're not going to be able to learn the job, do it well. When we know there are a lot of shifts in cognition with age, not all of them are decline. There's changes, as we know, in, say, verbal fluency. And so it's important that we recognize that on an institutional level, those problems are there. And then personal, which is ideas, attitudes, beliefs, and practices on the part of individuals that are biased against persons or groups based on their older age. Maybe someone saying, I'm too old to learn a new language. I'm too old to go on that trip. I'm too old to get better. And we can see very clearly the negative impacts that might have. There's some data looking at the impacts on a small scale and a later, grander scale of what ageism has. And I'll just mention a couple of these. I'm not going to go into them all, but you might see increased patient passivity. People just give up when they're treated poorly and they're dismissed. There's an association between ageism and elder abuse, significant impact on and cost on the healthcare system, and it negatively influences physicians and others in training to develop these biases. We know, based on the lack of interest of people to go into the field of geriatrics and treat older adults. There are some initiatives that currently exist to help combat ageism around education. There are tools that they provide, and I encourage you to take a look at these when you have a chance to learn a little bit more about what you can do. And I'll go into some of the main factors that they talk about. There are 3 evidence-based strategies that were taken from the Reframing Aging and the World Health Organization to combat ageism. The first, and I think the one that's most relevant to our day-to-day, is educational activities. Right? There's something we have the ability to do being part of the healthcare system, but also with lots of trainees around us all the time. There are a lot of resources and sample tasks that they offer, and the goal is to really educate about aging, destigmatizing it, helping people develop a more thoughtful, accurate, and nuanced understanding of what aging looks like and the broad spectrum of experiences of older adults. And this can be done through role-playing, simulation, virtual reality. When we have that closer relationship to something, we feel more connected to it, we're going to have more empathy, and it'll break down some of the stigma that we hold and the prejudices. There is also some data to suggest that earlier intervention in residence training leads to stronger and more sustained responses. So ideally, we're starting this early if we can. These are just a few examples from the World Health Organization of language and then examples of what we can say instead. I will kind of just give an example of one, the third one there: seniors, elderly, aging independence, and othering terms that have stereotypes. We've shifted a lot of us to older adults, right? Inclusive terms, we and us, being thoughtful about that too, and the choice of how you speak to people. And I think the relevance of that being elder speak. It's a term that I'm sure many of us have heard of, and it can be hard to catch sometimes, catch ourselves and others when it's happening. But it can be using a sing-song voice, right? Talking to older adults like they're children, changing our pitch and tone or exaggerating words, speaking loudly automatically without someone doesn't actually have hearing impairment, but we're just yelling at them because they're older. Oversimplifying word choice with someone because we assume they can't understand. And a lot of this is implicit. We don't even realize we're doing it. So my hope today is for everybody to pay a little bit of attention to how you talk to a patient when you walk into the room with them, how you talk to an older adult before you've even gotten to know them, what your initial prejudices and assumptions are, and how that impacts how you treat them. Even calling someone honey, dear, sweetie, that can be infantilizing and not feel great. Policy and law, there are some tools in reframing aging that talk about policies that can be designed to avoid ageist language and help the care we provide be more well received. And the ACLU doesn't have a page dedicated to age discrimination, which I always think is interesting. I rechecked again just yesterday to make sure, and they do not have anything dedicated to it. And the goal of intergenerational interventions, these are also really cool, right? It's the exposure. The goal is to foster interaction between different generations. We see the school programs where kids go to various communities and spend time with older adults, and they develop real relationships. They get to know each other, and it's good on both sides, and it helps to break down those images and even fears we have about ourselves and our aging. There are those community buildings where they have that are intergenerational. I think they're so cool, and they do really make a difference. So in summary, ageism is complex, deeply ingrained in our society, with many health-related negative downstream effects. Education and exposure are key in combating and decreasing ageist attitudes. And there are effective research-based tools for change. I would love to hear ideas, stories, experiences that you might have or questions, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jesse. That was fantastic. Please feel free to unmute to ask a question. Or if you're not able to unmute, you can put questions in the chat, or if there's something you want to share, like something you've learned along the way, or something you've noticed that would be helpful for this discussion.
I'll say one challenge that I notice I face and others when we talk about this is, we pay attention to elders speak. We start to notice that we have it the way we talk to people. It's hard to call people out. I think that can be really a challenge, and ourselves, but you notice other people talking. Sometimes it can be hard to call people out and speak up. So I find modeling a different approach. You're in a room with someone and you start speaking very differently to someone. Sometimes that can be a more subtle way. But trying out different things, it's a form of microaggression, right? Elders speak in any other way. And so approaching it the same way and thinking of it, it's challenging, but we can make small differences with it. And I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I've had patients come to my clinic telling me about experiences they've had in other clinics. I have a patient who's a retired nurse, very well organized in keeping track of her blood pressures and meds. It coordinates her own appointments. And she has shared several experiences about people trying to talk to her in a very childlike way or not, or talking to her son instead of her about what's going on without even asking her any questions. And it's very distressing to her because she is managing everything herself, has no cognitive impairment, and she does really well. So I do hear my patients sharing experiences with me relatively frequently.
Yeah, I mean, people then end up with the increased passivity, or as it's also known as learned helplessness. People are ignored enough, they talk to their kids enough, they just stop trying. And that's not good. Were you gonna say something?
Oh yeah, I was wondering, Jesse, I personally have no problem calling out a colleague
Yeah.
if I feel like they are using ageist language or giving feedback. But I think I have a harder time when it's that personalized ageism or if it's within a family system.
Yeah.
If somebody's own family member is treating them in a certain way that I appreciate there's also a cultural intersection there. But yeah, just curious what strategies you have that we can use to sort of empower our patients and their families so that they don't internalize that their experiences are just how society is.
I'll be really direct with my patients sometimes. I'll say, the family member speaking over a patient or something, and I'll just say, hey, I want to redirect and talk about them. But I'll be direct with my patients, and they'll say, I can tell by the way they're talking to me that they are hesitant or timid or something like that. And I'll say to them, I want you to question me. I want you to come to me, and I would not feel like. And when they do, I celebrate it very directly that they've spoken up, that they have created space for themselves where they deserve to be seen and heard. So I think I'm just very direct about it with them to reinforce the positive behavior when I do see it in there, because I think it still will sometimes find its way out. And yeah, I think I'm just very, very direct about it with people in that sense, about reinforcing the positive and trying with the negative, saying, can I rephrase that for you? Can we try that a little bit of a different way? I wanna help you figure this out. I really think try to team with them with navigating those conversations. Thanks.